Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Melissa.
And my name is Tracy, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Dr. Ken Martens Friesen. Ken grew up in India, and in this episode, Ken shares about his return to the U.S. as a 10-year-old and feeling like people looked at him like an alien. Time helped him adjust to the U.S., and once he was done with university, he was overseas again, working in a school in Lesotho, a refugee camp in Lebanon, and as a missionary in Vietnam. Through his current university position back in the United States, he is able to help others see the world through history and study abroad experiences, which continually keep him connected to his growing up years and passion for helping others gain a global mindset. So, buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part 2 of Ken's round trip story gets ready for takeoff. Welcome back to our second episode with Dr. Ken Martens Friesen. He's a professor of history and international studies and the coordinator for global education at Fresno Pacific University. And he's also the author of Energy, Economics, and Ethics. We also want to mention that Ken grew up outside the U.S. and continued to go abroad throughout his life. So we look forward to hearing more of your stories, Ken.
Great. I look forward to sharing.
So please remind us where you lived abroad and how long you were there.
Yeah, well, my primary experience, first one and probably the most significant, was growing up, being born and raised in India. I lived in India till the age of 10. Then our family moved we hadn't been there before, moved to Reedley, California. And I spent the next 10 years or so there, and then went to college at Fresno Pacific, and in the middle of that, went to Lebanon for basically a semester for 3 months, and then after went to Lesotho, Southern Africa for 3 years, and then up to China for 3 months, and then finally with my wife and kids, we went to Vietnam and lived in Vietnam for almost 5 years.
Okay. And then when did you return from India with your family?
Well, so we returned in 1972, and there's multiple reasons. One was my parents actually had been missionaries there for 20 years. Dad had started a hospital, built it literally from the ground up, and then they turned it over to a local Indian physician and nursing staff, everything. So basically it was time to leave. It's time for foreigners to leave India. I think both the missionaries felt it was time, but also the Indian government said it's time for missionaries to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a very large exodus of missionaries and foreigners generally in the early 70s from India. So that was one reason. More formally, my parents had been there 20 years, and my oldest brother, John, had just finished high school in India, and it was time to go to college. So they decided that was a good time to go back.
Okay. And so you mentioned that you came back to Reedley, but you went somewhere first upon landing.
Yeah. So actually on the way back, it was, again, something that seemed normal to me, but I guess you look back and you realize it's not quite so normal. We actually flew from India to Germany, first time on a plane. I'd always gone on a ship before then. But we, on our way back, went to Europe and traveled through Europe in a 5-seater Opel Kadett, which there were 6 of us, so that was a little tight. But we camped throughout Europe for several weeks, and then we flew to Boston, and we picked up a car. Dad bought his first car in Boston, and we're there on July 4 for the Boston Pops, 1972, and then made our way all the way across the U.S. on that car, visiting family, churches, parents doing church itineration, and us visiting family all the way across the U.S. and finally to Reedley.
Wow.
Were your folks originally from Reedley?
No, my folks are originally from Oklahoma. My dad went to Tabor College in Kansas. My mom went to Biola University, where she became a nurse. And then they actually did a residency, though, here in Fresno at the Valley Medical Center, what it used to be,
Mm-hmm.
here on the south side of town. So, yeah, so they were in Fresno, but they had never been to Reedley. The doctor in Reedley was retiring, and so Dad took his place and was
Okay.
came here for that.
You mentioned that that was the first time you had flown, that the other times had always been on ship. So how many trips did you guys make by ship?
Not many. No, just one. Yep. We during my lifetime, we went on furlough one time in the mid '60s. So we came back and ended up in Madera, which isn't far from Fresno. And Dad worked in a hospital there for that furlough, and then returned back to India. Lots of
Interesting.
excitement on that trip. The ship caught fire in the Hong Kong harbor, and we were all supposed to
Wow.
evacuate and different things. But yeah, typical missionary kid events.
So tell us, Ken, a little bit about your transition back to living in the US.
Yeah. So we came back in 1972. I was 10, going into the sixth grade. And we came in the summer, though. So, things are a little bit quieter generally, and moved into a rented house initially. And my parents went to the Reedley Mennonite Brethren Church, and it was a big Reedley MB church in Reedley. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and they of course wanted us to get into transitioned into American life and everything. So the first event that I remember in middle of the summer was Vacation Bible School, and so which Reedley MB had, of course. And I just remember very distinctly in my cut off jeans that Mom, just cut off, and those were their jeans, and walking a couple blocks over to Reedley MB and opening the door. And I must have been late, or at least I felt I was late or something, and having 50 or 75 kids just stare at you and just like, who is this creature from another world, from another
Mm-hmm.
planet? What are they doing, and why are they wearing cutoffs? That's not in style. Everybody knows that. That's so out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And just that initial kind of shock of being in a culture that is supposed to be yours, but not at all feeling like it's your culture, your people, whatever. All the kids are maybe the same skin color, the same background, but you can't relate. You just cannot relate.
Yeah. You technically speak the same
Yep,
language, but
yep,
you're not really
yep.
speaking the same language.
Very much so. Yeah,
And so your older siblings were
yeah,
still at home. Your oldest brother was going to college, but
yeah.
did it help to have your siblings?
Yeah, although it was typical, sibling rivalries and things. So I was the youngest. My next older brother was 3 years older than me. And he had his
Yeah.
own, friends, and he was dealing with his own transitions and everything.
And at that age, when you're 10
Yeah,
and they're like starting to be teenagers, yeah, that's a big gap emotionally.
yeah. No matter where you are,
Yeah.
it's a difficult time. And then my sister was, another 2, 3 years older, but she had her own, girlfriends that she was trying to connect with.
Mhm.
But all of us, it's just trying to find friends and try to find people that could relate, and realizing very quickly that no one cared about India. No one cared at all about
Mhm.
where you grew up or what kind of, other than you're weird, and you ate curry, that was your meals. Like, that's disgusting. And
Oh.
all of those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was very, very hard.
So tell us a little bit more about some of those specifics.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the hardest thing was just making friends. Sixth grade, everyone had been together. I went to a public uh, primary school through sixth grade and a public junior high, and then went to Emmanuel, which was a private school. But each one of those, three transitions: sixth grade, getting there, then seventh grade, junior high, and then ninth grade, another transition and another very different school. But each one of them, just making friends, figuring out what's what, how the systems work, trying to navigate all of that. And obviously as a kid, not realizing what's really happening here and not really realizing all that you're trying to process as now a third culture kid, not feeling like you can connect. I didn't like baseball. I didn't like football. You know, I like cricket, What's that about? You
Mhm.
know? Um, or,
Yeah.
whatever. Eventually, of course, starting to love all the same things, but always feeling just a little bit out, coming to school and having a meal of I remember just bringing like bread and butter and curry and, like, what is wrong with that little kid over there? And I was also the shortest and also the youngest in my grade since my mom had homeschooled me a year ahead. So I was, in so many ways just felt like I was not really part of of the regular students and, just wanting to fit in and just feeling like that's so hard.
My little son, um, had some seaweed, the
Yeah.
nori, just
Yeah.
this those personal seaweed sheets, and he would eat them, and the kids at school were like,
Yeah.
"That smells
Yeah.
gross." And, when you're insulting somebody's food, that's insulting their home,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, it
And so
is.
that's a really like, food is a
Mhm.
big deal.
Yeah, our daughter, same thing. She loves, she's Vietnamese background and grew up in Vietnam for 3 years, so still has a lot of that. Came and
Mhm.
loves seaweed. That's a great example because it's just so foreign, and the whole idea of eating seaweed, like, that is just gross. But she'd bring that to school and she'd eat it. And, fortunately, there were a few that could understand, but most of her friends that's just the strangest thing in the world.
So tell us a story about something that was helpful during that season of life.
Yeah, I think, well, time was helpful. Just for me, and being a relatively young kid, I think I do remember within, a year or two, you could basically put that behind you, and then things were quote unquote normal at that point. I was, student body president my senior year. I was,
Wow.
normal. I played on the tennis team. I, did those kind of things that
Yeah.
everyone, normal, whatever, aspired to. So, but then also just every once in a while, we'd have a missionary kid reunion or just informally, our families would meet because most of the missionaries were back at the same time. They weren't necessarily in Reedley. Some were up in Oregon or Canada or different places, but just getting together with people that you could relate to and that, yeah, I remember Cody. I remember going down that slide. I remember,
Mhm.
doing this experience or that, and that was just wonderful to be able to connect with other, missionary kids like that. Um, and again, at the time, it just felt like, of course, that's who you relate with, um, and that's very ordinary. But then, you look back and you think, wow, that was a real treasure to be able to actually reconnect with people that were
Mhm.
growing up and had the similar, transition experiences that you did, and can talk about that as well.
Yes. Definitely. And I think that there's a phrase for that, meetups.
Yeah.
I've kind of seen that phrase in the literature.
Right. Yeah.
And it's so important because it reminds kids of who they are,
Yeah.
who they were,
Yeah.
and you can create more memories. It's like you get to be your whole self
Yeah.
with those
Yeah.
families and those kids.
My sister still, this is 40 years down the road. Sister still corresponds a lot. Of course, there's a Facebook group for Cody, missionary kids. She lives up in Abbotsford, British Columbia. And there's, reunions either in Washington State or up in the northwest somewhere. Just lots of opportunities to keep connected. And of course, the internet makes that much, much easier. But just that idea that you have this community of like-minded or the memory-minded, that you can show a photograph, post a photograph on Facebook in that group. It might be an old teacher, it might be a picture from some place that everyone took hikes to, or just the lake, Cody Lake, and everyone has a comment about it. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting, or it just kind of goes to show that when you have an experience growing up that is different from the average person around you, that those relationships and the connections with the handful of people that do kind of know where you came from
Yep.
are meaningful in a deeper way. Like, there's a handful, a couple of people that I keep in touch with from my growing up, but I don't feel this kind of need to stay connected because of it helping me stay connected to something important about who I am.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I feel like it just kind of reinforces that it matters and that it doesn't go away, I guess. This part of you that, it's not to say that it is the dominant piece of who you are at this point. You've lived a long life and done lots of different things, but it's still an important, meaningful, valuable piece of who you guys are.
Yeah, very much.
Our next question is what we like to think of as our choose your own adventure question, and meaning that you get to pick which one of these questions you want to answer. So, A, what rhythms do you have in place which allow you to remember your time abroad? B, what do you do with all the feelings, memories, relationships, love for the people and place, etc.? Or C, do you have a favorite funny story about your time anywhere or transition back?
Yeah. Well, A and B, in a sense, are somewhat similar, so I thought I'd answer kind of a connected answer between those two. And that is, you're asking about rhythms and then also the feelings and memories. I think for me, being able to reconnect is the rhythm, is the important thing that I really try to do. Now I'm thinking specifically of Vietnam, but also back to India, as it turns out. So in Vietnam, like I mentioned in the other episode, I've led more than 10 groups of students back to Vietnam, or not for them, not back for me, back to Vietnam, and spend usually anywhere from two to 4 weeks. One time we took a group for a semester, though, and that was really meaningful. But just to connect back, and every time we go and connect those students as well with our friends and some of our experiences, and have them meet and talk to, real Vietnamese people, which, for us was just our work colleagues or our, people that we knew from varieties of experiences, church or other places in our lives. And so it's just that reconnection. Then in the year 2000, so this would have been almost 30 years after I'd been to India, I had the opportunity to go back to India for the first time. And I was representing my dad, actually, or my parents, at a anniversary celebration for the Mennonite Brethren Church, and I was able to. I was kind of like the local dignitary, but much more important to me was just again connecting back with some of the Indians that I
Mm-hmm.
had remembered. I mentioned earlier about Rani and Cheetah Babu, and connecting back with childhood friends. And since then, I've been back again to India 4 or 5 times with students, 2 or 3 times, and then with other groups and things. So just those reconnections are really, really important,
Mm-hmm.
and I've really felt like that's what I do to keep those feelings alive. And of course, every time it's different, and you realize, India's not the same, Vietnam's not the same. We're actually back in Lesotho a couple of years ago, and I met my best student when I was a teacher in Lesotho is now the headmaster of the same school. So to be able to go back and meet him and realize, a lot has changed, but some has stayed the same, and yeah, just really, really good
Neat.
experiences.
Ken, we also were speaking about how you had different transitions throughout your life. And so just was curious about some of the differences between the transitions that you made
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
And so you told us about your childhood transition. Could you tell us a little bit about like your transition with your family and moving back to the US
Yeah.
from Vietnam?
Yeah, that is definitely a very, very different transition, because there are many things that need just to be done, and they have to be done now. Like, what school is your kid going to be in, and what where are you going to live is the main one, and how are you going to live, and what's the church, and what's the neighborhood, and all of those just much more immediate questions, and then also how are your kids going to adjust? And what can you do to make that adjustment better for them? Because, in our case, well, our oldest remembered living in Washington, D.C., where he was born and grew up till the age of 5, but now he was 10, and he's making his adjustment basically exactly the same uh, time of life that I was when I came back from
Mm-hmm.
India. But then our youngest two, who, our second son was 11 months when we went to Vietnam, and 5 when he came back. And, of course, he didn't remember anything. So it's his first time back and just trying to, figure out life and kids and kindergarten and, all of that. And then our daughter,
Mm-hmm.
born in Vietnam and came back, and the stuff that a 3-year-old needs to deal with, and all of those transitions. So really, I think you forget about your own transition, or we did just forget a lot about our own transition because just you've got so much on your mind just to get your
Mm-hmm.
kids, situated and in school and everything that needs to be done.
Right. Our kids' transition is our transition as
Yeah,
parents.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Or I think
Yeah,
sometimes that then what happens is we we deal with all the logistical details and things, and the emotional side of the
yep, yep.
transitions gets
Push
just
stuff to the side. Yep.
All right. Well, as we conclude this part 2, we have a couple last questions for you. So please tell us a final story, Ken, about how your time abroad continues to add value to your life now.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the biggest advantages or just the goodness of being at TCK and then experiencing life now is simply being able now to, as I said earlier, to infect other students with the love of just things global, of the international, of seeing things beyond one's own very limited perspective that we get in the U.S. Even if we are surrounded by other cultures. In schools now, it is much, much more diverse, which is wonderful. But still, it's America, and you get a certain perspective here, and just being able to now try to connect my students with a larger, broader perspective, and of course our own kids, and our been fortunate enough that our oldest son went back to Vietnam after college and served with the Mennonites for a year. Then our second son lived in South Africa for a year as a volunteer with the Mennonites, some different programs. So, and cross-cultural studies and different things. So just on a family level, being able to really encourage and excite, see that as a exciting thing to do, not as something to fear. And same thing with students in general. Just so great when I see a student that goes out and that like a first generation Hispanic female went to Vietnam with us and spent a semester in Vietnam, which was just mind blowing just to start with for her and especially for her parents. But after that, as a result, in part of that, she went and taught English in South Korea for 2 years, just on her own, just went there. And, those kind of stories where people go off and just that's a springboard to even more opportunities that they have found.
All right, Ken, what's one last word of encouragement or advice you can give to our listeners, especially those who are transitioning back to their home countries or, trying to find their place again?
Well, I think really the most important thing is connections, I think, trying to keep connected. Fortunately, now it's much, much easier. So being connected with other TCKs, probably preferably with ones in that country, wherever you were, in the culture that you lived in, or, obviously local nationals, people from that culture, but just keep connections, keep those strong as possible. Make friends locally that understand your situation, that can really empathize with you in the difficult times, but also rejoice and be glad with you in the times where you're, celebrating the Independence Day of Lithuania or whatever it is, or South Africa or Lesotho or, that no one else understands why you're doing this, but you do, and someone else does. And that's always, I think, just really important to make those connections.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ken. And every time we have a new guest, I feel re-energized also to be able to think about these issues. And
very
it
much.
helps me to, it helps us to remember ourselves.
Yeah.
Remember this
Exactly.
international side of ourselves that we treasure so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So thank
Agreed.
you.
Thank you, both of you. It's very fun to do this.
As we land this interview, we hope that you have been inspired by Ken's stories from when he was a 10-year-old boy transitioning to life in the United States to where he helped his own son in his return to the U.S. from Vietnam at 10 years old. Whether providing global experiences for his own family or taking his university students overseas to broaden their global perspective, Ken knows that each experience is a springboard to more wisdom about our world, and the connections we make with people around the globe are worth hanging on to. No matter what leg of the journey you're on, friends, we are so grateful you have brought us along with you.
Come back next time to hear from our next guest, Carolina Baiza, eco-hotel owner from El Salvador, who returned to El Salvador after living overseas to help in the sustainability movement in her own beautiful country. You won't want to miss Carolina's interview.
If you're enjoying our podcast, we'd love it if you would leave us a review in your podcast app. And don't forget, you can visit our website at roundtripstories.com to see photos of our guests and to join our email list. And of course, tell your friends to travel the world with us. No passport, no packing, and no goodbyes required. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.